This is the Authentic Change Podcast, and I am Mike Horne. Authenticity reflects what we want from each other and our organizations: open communication, trust, community, fun, and opportunity. I want to help you to do your best in your personal and professional relationships. This podcast delivers expertise, insights, and approaches on authentic leadership, to live your purpose, to lead from your values, to establish connected relationships, to steward people and culture change, to build and sustain prosperity, and to open doors and possibilities. This podcast will assist you in paving the way forward to personal, team, and organizational prosperity. Welcome to an additional episode of the Authentic Change Podcast with Mike Horne. I am absolutely delighted today to have as our guest and to introduce to our audience Carole Burton. It's just a delight. I think we're going to have a great conversation on integrity and authenticity, particularly as it relates to the experiences that Carole brings to us that focus on ethics and equity and adaptability. She is the founder and facilitator of Radiance Resources and podcast host of Radiance Real Talk. I have found my preparations for today's podcast just to be uplifting, heartwarming, and taking me in a different direction. And that's why I'm so glad to welcome to our audience, Carole Burton. Carole, can you tell our audience about yourself and what brought you to your work?
I will. Thank you, Mike, for having me on. And hello to everyone listening. It is an absolute pleasure to be in your lexicon and into your universe. So thank you. My space of where I am today, like all of us, has been a continuing lifelong journey. And being curious, I always ask rhetorical questions. And in that, I wanted to learn about how things work. So I became a student of life, and in specifics, I became a student of understanding the art and science of sales. And then led me into really understanding how operations and processes work in all kinds of ways. And that's pretty much been my business life. Well, because I'm a continuing learner, I wanted to understand a little bit more about leadership. It was an area of topic as I was creating and generating my business acumen. What exactly does it mean to be a leader? And why is that so important? And after completing a master's degree in that space with an undergraduate degree in human resources, I literally used both of those spaces in practicum in my work life. And then I started asking a question: what would life look like in our workplaces if we had equity daily, helping simplify our processes and systems? Why does it take 26 steps to do one thing? It was always a question that I asked. And so if we are going to continue to be part of this fluidity that we are all embracing in every aspect of our lives, I continue to ask that question: what would life look like if we lived in a space where we could adapt, where we could bring our full selves, and where we could be our purpose to support each other in their purpose? It's just, these are rhetorical questions that pop in my mind. And so I go and investigate them, and then I ask others, well, what do you think? And so it was another way for me to understand what leadership is, to be honest, right? And in that, the other thing is my dad. I talk about him a lot. He's a very cool guy. And my father asked me last year a question, which was after there was some corporations who made commitments and changes to how they were going to walk into their workplaces, right, to really assist and support our employees and themselves for that for that matter. My dad asked me, he said, Carole, I've been seeing all these letters come out. I said, yep, Dad, there's a lot of letters. There's a lot of written commitment. And he said, Carole, in the new norm, how can a pseudo society exist? I thought that was a great question. And then I said, it was a stopper, right?
Right.
And so we had this great conversation that evolved into really looking at ethics in our workplaces. And as you know, that brings in authenticity. And of course, that brings in equity and integrity. It brings in all of those spaces. And then it also brings in empathy. So for me, as far as integrity, if we are intentional to really to bring our best selves, to create an equity in our daily processes and practices and how we communicate, it brings abundance. It brings forth a different way of looking at integrity with purpose, with strategy, with intention. We always talk about leadership as far as the good of leadership. Now, you know as well as I, everything has the light and the dark. It's the balance of who we are. It's a balance of everything. There's daylight and there's moonlight. And so if we have integrity, we don't have to worry about the external if we are focused on our internal and in our purpose. And for me, that's where the empathy, ethics, equity shows up within integrity of who we are every day. Now, I know that sounds really ethereal. I ask for us to really look at that from a discernment space. Are we really able to bring our full selves to where we work, where we live, where we play? And if not, why are we choosing to stay in a scarcity mindset?
Well, all wonderful questions, and I think a wonderful approach to living. You raised so many great questions for us, and just a couple of the notes that I jotted down while I was listening to Carole. First, around curiosity. I remember as a child, my mother always had the expression, curiosity killed the cat and satisfaction brought her back or brought him back. I don't know. Did you hear that as well, Carole?
That one I did not hear, but I think it's a good one.
Yeah, curiosity killed the cat and satisfaction brought it back. Mm-hmm. Something like that. So it's a way of being curious, and I think a way of opening up the possibility. And what you said makes really equates to that. I think that life, when we, how do we hang our purpose out there? How do we live our life with purpose? And you discuss the ideas of simplification and, its cousin, complexity. Complexity grows like a weed. It's all around. To be simple is graceful, and it can be difficult. And finally, I just want to comment, because you put together so many great ideas, but I want to comment also on the idea of polarities, because I think it's important in how we use ourselves and what we do as authentic leaders. And you'll have a different view of that perhaps, but from authentic leadership. But this use of polarities is, you reference it to moonlight and daylight. I think about it as sort of psychological opposites, but not direct opposites.
No.
As a way to stretch our thinking across a continuum. And if I am more timid or fearful than I am positive and courageous, maybe as a other end of that polarity, and that may be a poor example. I know you'll help me. Mm-hmm. But as I think about that polarity, if I was more timid and fearful, I could claim more of myself.
Yes.
By understanding and embracing that polarity. It
Yes.
may not be comfortable for me. It may be awkward. It may not be where I, where I feel sort of a natural flow. But it is possible to become a larger version of myself
Yes.
by doing this. All right, back to your showstopper question.
Yeah, because it's a choice. So I've had a client recently ask the question, can people really change? Fundamentally speaking, can we really change? I let the question hang because it wasn't about the we, it was about the person who was asking the question. And so sometimes silence is the best answer in that case. Sometimes running to the confrontation, which I personally love to do because that's where I grow. And that is where I live in my authentic self, causes vulnerability. That is one word that our leaders grapple with. I ask, if I say as a leader, I don't know, can you help me? I firmly believe that vulnerability is the cornerstone of empowered leadership.
It's so, I think you're not alone. I think many practitioners, people working at the levels of strategy and systems and coaching and helping individuals, teams, and organizations to prosper, come at it from a similar perspective. I've worked with leaders all over the world in big corporations and leading. For most of them, my observation is that it's difficult to be vulnerable. How do you ignite that, or how does it spark, or how does it come to you with abundance?
Yes. So I will give an example again of my father. My father is in his 80s. And when my mother has moved through 12 years of a dementia experience, and my father is an amazing man because he identified that my mother was really the leader of our family. Now, my mother allowed my father to think he was the leader of our family. However, when she was not mentally present anymore, I think he realized the power of their amazing relationship as a pair, of how much they needed each other. And in that, my sister and I could never fill her shoes. We couldn't. My mother taught us, looking back, how to connect, how to communicate, how to respect my father as quote unquote head of the household. When we would ask my father a direct question, he would sit there and look at us because he always relied on my mom. When we would present something to him and ask him, Dad, what are your thoughts? He would then go into his business brain and give us his thoughts. And then we would ask the question again. And we talk slowly. Not that my father is slow, that's not it. But we would talk slowly and methodically to allow him to process it through. So I'm sharing with you the steps is what we did. For him to come to a conclusion that we all agreed with. Now, my sister and I were working in the background, by the way, to pull all this together, just so you know. We wanted for him to make these really difficult choices in an empowered way. And in that, we created a whole different relationship as individuals, as daughters, as siblings. And it allowed for us, for my dad, to be vulnerable with respect, with care, of course, with love. And listening to what his needs and wants were for my mother when my mother could no longer speak. My mother taught me about patience during those 12 years. My father taught me about the depth of humanness within vulnerability as a man, and hence as a human for me as a leader.
You are an expert on pairs. Your the observations that you made relative to patience and depth of ocean, depth of humanness. And you also mentioned the pairing with your sister. And it's an often overlooked space in organization development and the social psychologists who intervene in organizations, because we're often at the individual. Let's coach the executive, let's coach this person, let's develop that person. All good. I say that lightly, and perhaps it comes off a little cavalierly, but that's not the intent.
No, it's not. I understand.
And on the team,
yes,
let's build our purpose, our mission, let's identify our values, do all this great work so that we can, so that we will make a difference in the world.
Right.
And often so much innovation in organizations happens at a pair, in a pair.
Yes, it does.
You're expert on that.
Yes.
What advice or experience or observations or insights might you have on what you've seen, what you've observed, what you would anticipate in integrity issues between between individuals in a pair?
I sat down and began to discern, how do I play my part in any relationship I choose to develop? It was a choice. And in that, I recognized the adaptive leadership model, which is follower-centric. The platinum rule, which is follower-centric. I consciously chose to move from the golden rule into the platinum rule space of thought. I've constantly chosen to move from a scarcity mindset of freeze, flight, right, or fight into an abundance mindset. I constantly invite others to do the same, whether they realize it or not. In integrity, in the study of integrity as a salesperson, I learned the art and the science of sales, which is nothing but relationship. And in that, sales can be very tricky. We both know that. It can be a slippery slope. I'm not saying it can't, because I know it can. Some people would say, well, wait a minute. It's all in how you look at it. It's all in the perception. And then there's the perception of going over crossing the other line, over the line. We both know. In that study of the art and in that study of the science of sales, I chose to walk through, how am I going to be a salesperson, be integrous, be authentic, hit my numbers, and sell a product that I believe in that is high quality. So all I have to do is build an authentic relationship with that client. That has been something that I've developed since about the age of 15, 16 years old. And I have asked people, I guess, throughout my life as I look through this in this lens to do the same. And so I think a lot of it is, where do we put our bar? To answer your question directly, how high do we set our bar for ourselves? Do we set it so high that we can't attain it? I've actually had a manager who was I had never worked that hard before for a person in my entire career with 26 managers. She was my first leader, 26 managers. I only had 3 because of where they set their bar, because of how they set their bar. And so for me, Mike, it is a conscious choice. It's the aha. It's the, do I choose, as they would say in politics, to have mud on my skirt, or do I choose to live in my authentic, with integrity self, to know that I did the best that I could every single day, to know that I am living my legacy every single day, because I don't know who I'm impacting every single day.
You know, so many great and wonderful points again, Carole. As I think about, my exposure to Wilfred Bryan's psychology and Tavistock, and you posit a different choice for us, right? Because Bion psychology is really based on the hunter's mentality, right?
Yes.
And you open us up to thinking with abundance about the receiving thing, which I think takes us right back to a discussion of polarities, right? About hunting and receiving.
True.
And it really makes the case for, at least I think in the perspective that I understand, adaptive leadership, because it is about follower care. And what we know is that the focus, it still is going to be for many people, but we're also going to move from a focus on workplaces to worker centricity.
Yes.
And maybe that, ties into that. And I don't know, for most of the leaders with whom I've worked, chief operating officers, chief scientific officers, chief manufacturing officers, and their teams, I have found that most of them have a bar of excellence. And in part, it's been driven by what has been rewarded, which was or is still for many and most, their technical abilities.
Right. So I always ask, when I work with technically driven, linear-minded thinkers, how did you develop that relationship? Because developing the relationship with a thing, with numbers, with steps, that's easy. Developing relationships with people is very different, as we both know. So I ask the question, and I help, if you will, move that mind from a transactional mindset into a transitional mindset into a transformational mindset.
Right. It's not about more information. It's about transformation.
That's it.
As we say, I think.
That's it. It's real. It's so, and it, some of the scientists that I've worked with, it baffles the mind, and it's a fantastic challenge. And it's fun to see when those light bulbs literally go off. The more linear, the more fun I have, Mike, because it's more joy, when they say, "Oh my gosh, Carole, I just had this amazing conversation with this child." I'm like, "And you were able to talk about what you love?" Yes. Isn't that fun? Yes. Okay. How can we do that with adults? Right. So
yeah.
Like that.
And what happens when the responsible adult shows up? And we're out of our, parent-child
exactly
routines.
Experience.
Carole, I'm wondering if you have a few pieces of recommendations or insights around creating these meaningful climates, these meaningful atmospheres, these meaningful worker-centric places where people feel valued and heard. how does, I think you just gave it part in your example, but what are a few ways that managers go about doing that?
First of all, managers have to look within themselves to identify their implicit biases. Then I think the next step is to say, okay, so what now what? And it's in the discernment of, why do I need to do it? Not so much the how, Mike. It's always in the why. I always question and live life in the why. The how shows up. The steps happen. And
Yes.
So it's the why. It's why do I do what I do?
And I think a good why starts with a good what. And you said that because I think about the it's what now what so what, right?
Yeah, it's the now what,
and that
so
preceded
what.
the why question. Yeah,
absolutely. And then it's not about guilt and shame. I really want to drive that to everyone. That's part of that scarcity mindset. It's not about the guilt and shame. It's separating the emotions from the what so. That's the one thing I learned from landmark education, right? Separating the emotions from the what so. Because when we do that, it's not about the attack on the person's hood. It's the attack on it's looking at the behavior. As a mid-level manager, why am I a micromanager? Why do not I think I trust people, but I got to know every millisecond of the day where they are? Really?
Oh, I'm no longer embarrassed to admit it. In my first role as a manager, I was a micromanager. I have blogged about how I've written about it. I will send you a link, Carole.
Love it.
Where I have tried to understand it.
That whole thing. And it goes back to something that happened where we lost trust. Something happened, and it could have been so minute. I asked, go back and figure that out. Mm-hmm. It will set people free in a way that they never had before.
Well, mine just encouraged them to say hello to one another. Literally.
So, it's always the internal. This is part of the transition of life. Thank you, Frederick Hudson's work, right on the renewal cycle, mm-hmm. right, of life chapters, his work in from the early 90s. And so it's all about that transition. We have got to go into the deep well of our stuff and sit in it and be uncomfortable and get comfortable in the uncomfortable. We can sit and be comfortable in the uncomfortable. That's when the chapters close. That is where the life begins. That is where the movement happens. This is the real talk.
As you said those words, I just felt my shoulders relax, myself open to opportunity, and it is real. And I believe that you bring that to every situation, which helps deliver your message on ethics and adaptability and equity and inclusion
and integrity. Absolutely, it does, and it doesn't have to be hard. This work can actually be enjoyed. I know, going through it. I read recently, when we allow to move through the stress, we don't get sick. We don't tense up. We don't crack our teeth because we're so, intense. We don't have to pop a wall open. When we allow ourselves to go through the stress, we let it flow through us. And if we know that we are integrous, if we're authentic, that is where our resiliency lies.
So true, right? I mean, it's and that's what supports, I think, success and prosperity.
Absolutely.
In transition. And Carole, as we wrap up, I know that as the founder and facilitator of Radiance Resources,
yes.
How would people get in touch with you in your work? What are some of the ways in which people can connect with you?
Absolutely. I love having these conversations and supporting people wherever you are and wherever your teams are. Thank you, Mike. LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. My website, radianceresources.com. And of course, Radiance Real Talk is everywhere. It's out there.
Wow, that's great. And it's really been an honor and a delight for me, Carole.
Thank you. Oh, absolutely. This is a pleasure. Thank you.
To be connected to your network, to be a part of your network, to honor your work, and to, let the world know about the great work that you're doing at Radiance Resources that really helps promote an effective use of self and spurs the kind of results that business leaders need. So once again, please reach out to Carole at radianceresources.com. And I'm sure from there you'll be able to find all the ways and tune into her podcast, please. Carole, can you mention the name of that once again for our audience, please?
Radiance Real Talk. Radiance, RADIANCE, Radiance Real Talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We're at a mutual thank you here. Yeah. Thank you for making this episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horne possible, and really for helping us and our audience to discover how we bring more of who we are to what we do. And I appreciate the work that you're doing with people and culture leaders to discover their authentic selves, to create the kinds of organizations that all of us desire. Once again, until you tune into the next episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horne, be well. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll subscribe today and tell a friend about our show. If you're looking for hands-on help to increase your success through authentic change, or have a question you'd like to hear me answer here, please email me at mike@mike-horne.com.